Hello and welcome to another special episode of The Brave Room. As always, I'm your host, Amirul. We have someone very special with us today. We have the lovely Anisa Sanusi.
Hello.
So, we are recording this off the heels of a big news story. But as we were discussing in the pre-show, time doesn't really exist anymore.
No.
So, we're doing a double dip into crunch. Before we get into some serious talk about overwork and mental straining, how about you introduce yourself to the lovely people listening to this podcast?
Hello, everybody. My name is Anisa Sanusi, and I am a UI UX designer based in London, UK. But I'm from Petaling Jaya, Malaysia, where I studied digital animation in the One Academy. And yeah, kind of moved from animation to currently video games. And obviously, crunch is a very important topic to my heart, and there's a lot to say about that.
Yeah, there definitely is. Before we get into that, the usual, this episode hits 2,000 plays, I'll have to take an audience suggestion, leave a comment, square brackets, serious suggestion, and work together, guys, because I will pick the coward option if you give me one. I should point out that we share an alma mater in this, because we're both from the One Academy.
Yeah, because we were just saying how a huge amount of the creative workforce is from the One Academy.
Yeah, obviously we're not going to slander the school here.
No.
But having met someone who graduated from the One Academy within the same few years as I did, we do need to talk a bit about what they tell you in the final year of that school. Do you remember the final year of the One Academy? They have that professional practice course where they teach you how to get ready for the industry.
You have to describe it for the audience and me, because my memory is really fuzzy now. So go on.
Okay, not everyone holds a grudge like I do. Okay, so basically, this is actually a really good module because they teach you about how to build a resume, how to build a show reel, and then the lecturers will usually impart some wisdom. Unfortunately, the wisdom boils down to, hey, expect long hours, no overtime, and probably weekend work. And this was always the weirdest conversation I would have with them, because I'm like, dude, you're one of the biggest unis in the region. You have a little bit of bargaining power to make that not a thing.
Yeah, so that's the thing, isn't it? Because a lot of the teachers in these universities and colleges, the good thing is that they have industry experience and they relay back those experiences to the students to, that's basically what the module is, right? Is to mentally prepare them of what's ahead. But the problem is they're kind of perpetuating the same terrible mindset that we're not supposed to accept. The whole, this is how it's been and it's going to be for the rest of your life as it was in my life.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was always the most egregious part of it, wasn't it? Because they tell you this like it's a badge of honor. They're like, no, everyone has to get crunched at first, and then maybe you get picked up by a good studio that treats you better.
That's sorry. It's gonna be a lot of me just making painful noises. That's a myth, isn't it? Just basically a myth, because what better company is there if none of them are held to a certain standard?
Yeah, and the thing I always hear is if you go to Europe, you have it made, because Europe has quite strict labor laws about that. I remember in university, my Malaysian friends would complain that lecturers would be unreachable between Friday 5 p.m. and Monday 8 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Because they take their work-life balance seriously there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, again, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? So, full disclosure to everybody listening, my entire work experience is actually in the UK. So, I am very much in the camp of Friday 5 p.m. If that's my working hours, don't talk to me. Sure, you can just email me, but I won't respond till Monday. And that's normal. That is so normal.
Yeah, it's even if I see it, I'm gonna act like I didn't.
Mark as unread. That's what I do.
Oh, I keep forgetting that feature exists. I should do that more. But yeah, I know there's a certain stereotype about people like us who have had the privilege of going overseas and seeing this stuff firsthand, coming home and being like, oh, the system sucks here. So I
Yeah.
just want to let our listeners know we're aware of this.
Yes.
And we will continue to use this position of privilege to criticize a big problem with the industry.
Yeah. I think it's important to kind of lay this out from the get-go, is that we're not here to, again, slander the differences of culture of Western and Eastern, the work culture around that. Like, I don't think Westerners do everything better. Definitely not. There's a lot of things that Malaysians should be proud of. But one of the things that obviously we want to be better at is the work-life balance. And at the moment, we need to shift the cultural thinking of this, in a sense that, like, it's not okay, Okay, now we're just going to go straight into the whole issue, which is a lot of studios in Malaysia, just by the nature of it, are outsourcing studios, right? So you're basically a studio of freelancers that work for studios in the West, from Japan, from Korea, or what have you. And because of where we are in Southeast Asia, we, by default, like by the currency exchange, it's just so much cheaper. Our labor is so much cheaper here than it is in the other parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just going to take a quick moment to promote something here, because I recently wrote a piece about this as well. And since we're talking about something cross-culturally, we need to dispel some kind of racist stereotypes that exist naturally that not many people have brought up, which is the idea of, we are the non-Western part of the world who didn't know we were being exploited like this, really.
I think everybody knows. That's the thing. But it's because, like, there's no alternative, so we're kind of stuck with this one path, and that is, to me, just mind-boggling. It shouldn't be this way.
It absolutely shouldn't. And the reason I brought that up was because a lot of the articles that do talk about this make it sound like they give foreign studios an out, is what I'm saying. They'll be like, oh, did you know the outsourcing studios you hire do mad crunch? I'm like, of course they know. That's probably why they hired them in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. A lot of what we're going to talk about today definitely is covered in the now, I'm hoping, quite famous video by People Make Games, whose host, Chris Bratt, is actually a friend of mine, and he actually came to me to ask for feedback on the video. So I gave him my thoughts and I critiqued a few bits to make sure that he got it right. And I think he touched upon a lot of very good points, very strong points. And in that video, he did say that based on the interviews with previous and current workers of some of the studios here in Malaysia, what the AAA studios or the bigger studios care about is just numbers, right? Like, how much can you do? How many percentage can you go up? And how can you keep the outgoing cash lower? So to them, it's just a numbers game. Like, they don't see people in those numbers. And when you flip that view on the other side, one person in the interview in that video mentioned that, well, that extra 5% is an extra 2 weeks of my life. And his life or her life is time away from family, time away from friends. And we all know now, especially in the huge global pandemic, like currently, that shows you exactly what is important. And it really pains to see that their time here on this earth is being shortened for a margin, a 5% margin for a bigger company in the West that don't even know who these people are.
Yeah, definitely. We also do get a lot of, like, the supposed business side arguments of this, which is like, well, would you rather a video game take 5 years between announcement and release? I mean, like, dude, we spent most of the 2010s like hearing about Cyberpunk, and that's barely out. That's the first game ever that came out and then hit Control Z.
Yeah, it's like that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, does it matter if you have to wait a little bit longer for a product to come out? Because what's the cost, right? What is the cost of making a certain product? At the moment, like, their cost is time, money, people, I guess, but they don't see the human cost of it. Like, again, time lost, energy lost, burnout. You know what? Burnout is a huge issue where you could technically push yourself for a good 2-3 weeks, months even. Like, some studios crunch for months. And what they don't talk about is the aftermath of that. Like, you literally take months, sometimes years, to recover from that period of your life. If you, again, take that into a scope of, like, time spent with family or doing things that you love and doing things that could, make you a better artist, a better person, That is time lost on just recovering. And for what? To get a video game out 2 months early. Pisses me off.
Yeah, and would you talk about it like it's definitely a systemic problem as well, right? Like everyone thinks that, oh no, it's the one bad guy studio that's doing this, the bad guy studio is tricking all these poor outsourced studios, and it's like, dude, no, there is no big bad guy here you need to defeat.
There is, yeah, I would say like the big bad is definitely the system, and our current system is capitalism, right? And it is a current that's the issue of I'm not going to go to like for anyone listening, it's not like I'm being all like, yeah, we should all be commies. No, but we can still
Comrade
critique
Anisa.
we should still critique the system. Oh gosh, I remember being really frustrated at this, and I was like, the system's broken. Like, if this is what's happening, the system is broken. And one of my friends, without missing a beat, he was like, actually, the system is working exactly as intended. And that hit me so hard in the heart, thinking like, no, you're right. Like, it is working. It is generating the income, the capitalist income, but at the cost of laborers, and it's going to the pockets of who? It's not just studio owners, it's the stockholders, shareholders, it's people in suits up top that is basically looking at the numbers. Wow, video game is profitable. How can we make more of this? How can we capitalize on this?
How can number go up?
Yeah. As video gamers, we all know, like, when number goes up, that's a good thing. We like that.
One thing we should bring up, though, is, again, it's easy to do this to criticize a big publisher because we know by their own admission that there is a suit up top there buying his second yacht for the year. Only his second yacht of the year. Can you imagine the state of things?
The poor soul.
The poor soul. Second yacht of the year. But in the case of Malaysian outsourced studios, that's not always the case. In, like your friend Chris Pratt said, for a lot of them, they're worried about this is how you keep the lights on.
Yeah.
This is the game you have to play.
Yeah. But the nature of my work, which is UX design, is that a lot of what we preach is empathy, right? You need to kind of put yourself in the shoes of other people, because the games that we make tend to not be the games that we want to play ourselves, right? Like, we're creating it for the players. And if I were to put myself in the shoes of studio owners, especially the ones based in Malaysia, they're in a very tight spot themselves, like there's a lot of different factors in play here. So number one, they do have pressure from up top. By up top, I mean other studios who are paying into their accounts to make sure that they can keep the lights on, to make sure that they can keep this business going. And from the sheer amount of studios in Malaysia, which by the way isn't a lot, there's such a limited amount of them. Like, if any one of them goes bust, that is like a weak link in the Malaysian games industry as a whole, So we, as an industry, all of us, we want everybody to thrive. Like, criticizing a company doesn't mean we want them to fail. We just want them to be better at what they're doing. And it's tough for them because, again, like, how can they can't really push back, right, to the bigger studios, because they know for a fact that another studio will undercut them and business will just go elsewhere. It doesn't even have to be a studio in the same country. It might be literally in any other country in Southeast Asia, right? Like, where as a region, we are at a disadvantage already. And it sucks. So, okay, that's one part. And the second part is the whole, this is how it's always been, so this is how we're going to be continuing it. In that Chris Pratt video, there was a few bits about like WhatsApp messages that sent to like the employees, and how some of the bosses were kind of pitting the employees against each other. And I'm just like, I'm trying to empathize with you, Mr. Boss person or boss lady. Like, that is definitely not the way to go. Like, you're literally, again, you're not seeing your employees as people. You're seeing them as machines.
An output machine, yeah.
Yeah.
That was definitely the most like horrific part of that video, hearing about the WhatsApp thing. First of all, just the idea of everyone in the company being in a group chat is
Blech. Yeah. Sorry. That was my reaction. I was like, no, this is so unprofessional. It's terrible.
Aside from that, there's also like, it's the idea of like pitting people against each other like that is kind of sus. Like, there's no way you can spin that to be the good guy.
No, and I'm definitely not defending that at all. But it's also like it's a power play, right? It's a power play in a smaller scale. Like the bigger studios that are doing their outsourcing, like they know they have the brand, they know they have the recognition, like literally millions of players all over the world, right? They're like, oh, we are the brand that does this game that everybody knows. So we're by bare minimum, we're gonna hit X amount of sales. Like they know that. They know that people are gonna use their brand as a huge portfolio piece in their CVs, in their portfolios, So they have no shortage of people coming up to them being like, hey, we can do the work for you, hire us, give us the money. And on a smaller scale, in locally, these studio managers, they know for a fact that all of these young, bright-eyed kids, they want to work in the games industry because they literally grew up playing all the video games. Like that's what we are. Like the nerd culture in Malaysia is so strong. Like we consume this, and we want to be part of the creative force. And in Malaysia specifically, I don't know what it is like in other countries, but like like I said, most people go through well-known art colleges like the One Academy, and it's like we've been trained from the One Academy to become like factory workers that just outputs high quality assets, high quality art. And this is the thing, like it's a very Asian mindset, right? Like you practice, but you don't necessarily create anything particularly original. You become, again, outsources. And to me, that's the issue, partially the issue, in a sense that like there's literally nowhere to go for these creative people. They have the talent, they definitely do, and they have the drive. Like it's the most human thing to want to be creative and to want to make something that represents you and what you want to share to the world, right? But where are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Like telling people just go indie, create your own studio. Like with what money? It's so difficult. It is so difficult. Only not even just in Malaysia. Like this is a issue no matter where you are in the world. Like the people who start companies tend to be the people who benefit from capitalism because they have capital, they have the money to start studios, they have investors, they have connections, they can take risks. Like time and time again, there's a lot of studies out there showing that the people who are the most successful tend to come from a certain bracket of people who are already wealthy, or at least people who are wealthy enough that if they do fail, they don't it's not the end of the world for them, right?
They can
start
afford
again.
a cyberpunk.
Exactly. So it's unfair on these creative workers to tell them again, like, oh, you don't like this is what the bosses do, right? Like if you don't like it, quit lah. And that's such a terrible mindset. Like I hear it when people do that with not even just video games, like even with say, oh, Malaysia is so bad, like, this is not so bad, and they go like, oh, leave lah. And it's like, no, that's not what we're trying to get at. Like we need to recognize the faults so that we can fix them.
Want things to be better. Like it's all right to want things to be better.
Yeah.
It's funny you should say that because as much as we wish it wasn't, like the business side of making a video game is part of making a video game. It's not something that someone tacked on because, under the current system, time is actually money. So you need to be in like an extreme position of privilege to be allowed to have time to do something that doesn't make money.
Yes.
So, it's one of those things where like, surely I don't have the answer here.
No, two random person in the podcast won't have all the answers, but
someone should tell that to Joe Rogan.
Oh God.
That's we'll slander him another day. So basically, what we're getting at is because I have spoken to some people who say that at the end of the day, the studio should be able to decide what's more important, your portfolio or your workers. And it's a very nice sentiment, and I 100% agree with him. But also, like, it's like you said, if you eventually, like, if I don't take this job, someone else will.
Mm-hmm.
And if this keeps going on, like, this compounds on itself, and in 3 months my lights are gonna be off, and anyone I dragged with me probably isn't going to be able to support their family. So I don't know why they're still working here.
It's yeah. So estimating how much work needs to be done and how much man hours that needs to be done to complete that work is something that is very difficult to do. Like anybody who's ever worked in any video game ever will be like, there's this thing where we have to estimate our tasks, and it goes very granular, right? Like even down to the point where like, okay, we need to create this one asset. How many hours will it take? How many days will it take? And then producers will take those, they count how many days, and then they have like a nice spreadsheet that shows, okay, it will take us X amount of months to finish this thing. So that is like the bare bone of any production. When it scales up to a bigger team, it gets a little bit jumbled up in the sense that like you need to account for unforeseen matters, right? So the unforeseen things are always sickness, time away, I don't know, national global pandemic. Yeah. So what the issue right now is people aren't being honest with the hours. I'm sure the workers are being honest, and they're being like, okay, this is going to take me like 2 weeks to do this in this quality that you want me to do it at, right? But the managers, they're just like, they're kind of cutting that into half and being all like, okay, so you can do that in 1 week if you just stay at the office for forever. Then we can finish 2 weeks worth in 1 week, and then they report back that to whoever that's contracting them and be like, my team did this in a week, so any more that you want me to do, this is how it's going to be. And that is just so dishonest. And the thing is, if you're an outsourced manager, like if this is literally your job, like that you've done this multiple times, surely you would know that something like this wouldn't take this long, or it should take a little bit longer. Like, at what part of that negotiation of the contracts and hours, and I don't know what goes on behind that. Like, I'm not saying that I know exactly what happens because I've never done this, but I just wonder, do they ever ask? Like, do they ever do checks, like welfare checks? That's such an official term, but it's just like, I think it's a really good indicator that someone cares, right? Like, are you sure that this is enough time? Like, how many people I don't want you to work overtime on this.
I was gonna say, like, you can trust corporate mega structures to make "How are you, buddy?" a corporate question. I'm not asking how you are. I'm doing a welfare check.
Okay, so when we're discussing like hours, the thing that comes back is always like, oh, okay, I have a huge distaste for the things that Elon Musk tweets, and one of his tweets was...
We're on Elon Musk now? Okay, cool. Hold on.
Because he tweeted, like, nothing great was ever created at 40 hours a week, or some incredible shit like that. And it's so, again, the whole, like, putting a badge on honor on overworking, burnout, and the whole hustling mentality. Like, you always have to constantly go. Like, if you do anything less than that, it means you're not passionate. It means you don't care about your craft. We're human. Oh my gosh, we need to sleep, we need to eat, we have like a finite amount of energy. And I don't mean energy in the sense of like getting up, driving to work, coming back. No, like creative energy, emotional energy.
I would argue like that does count, stuff like driving, because between like working from home and working to office, there is like a recovery time from having to drive back and forth.
Yeah, again, I'm completely blaming this on a capitalist system that we live under. The whole 8-hour working day and 5-day working week, it's to maximize production. Our quality of life has risen so much since the industrial age. Like, by logic, we should be working less and having the same amount of output, but no, we're working more and making less for ourselves, but the output is a lot. Like reading headlines of how billionaires have profited over the pandemic. It's like, how did they do that, right? It's literally off the workers' back.
Clearly, they picked themselves up by their bootstraps, and then
So hardworking.
Didn't you see that photo of Beth Jesus on the conveyor belt moving boxes by himself?
So we have conferences, right, where video game companies would come around and we talk to each other. And I remember this person who was the head of his company, and he was boasting at the fact that they do overtime or something like that, because they were saying, like, they have a bit of math going back, right? They're just saying, like, oh, okay, so imagine yourself as a worker. You come in, you take 10 minutes to set up your computer, to make coffee, and then suddenly you're catching up with your colleagues over the weekend, like, how was your weekend? That's another 10 minutes down the drain. And then you sit on your computer and you watch YouTube. So, like, how many hours is wasted in that, right? So we're just taking back the lost hours from workers being naturally lazy. And my brain just shut off at that point. I'm just like, bruh, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I
hope that's a direct quote, by the way, that whole reclaim the lost hours, because that's, oh boy.
It is so terrible. It's because, like, okay, number one, why are you hiring quote unquote lazy people in the first place? Then that's just like, that's your that's problem of hiring. Yeah. Okay. And number two, time talking to colleagues is bad. Like, creating, like, the people that you spend all of those hours with, like, you're not supposed to be friends with them. Okay, that's cool. And then going back home to shower and then coming back here, it's like, oh, so that's cool with you? Okay, like, it boggles the mind. And where does this distrust of your employee comes from? I don't get that. Like, because jobs are so hard. Like, any job seeker will tell you just how hard it is to get a job, right? Like, they put their best foot forward, and when you get one, like, you do try your best. Okay, maybe I'm very optimistic. Like, obviously not everybody is super, like, passionate and hardworking. Some people might need a bit more motivation, but bare minimum, like, a lot of people do want to do their best, especially if it's an industry of passion, like video games or any creative industry. Like, we're here because we want to be, and there's this dangling carrot of, like, you should be grateful that you're in the industry. Look at all these other people who couldn't get a job in the industry, so why would you treat them like as if they would slack off? If they do slack off, if they do have a lack of motivation, then I can assure you, if you spend more than 5 minutes just talking to them like a human being to another human being, they will tell you what is wrong. And the best companies that I've worked at care about your mental health, care about your emotional health, and they want to help you in that regard, so that when it is time for you to perform at work, you are performing 110%, because you are refreshed, you are energized, you are not worrying about your next paycheck, you're not worrying about not eating right, you're not worrying about all the other things that would contribute to a worker feeling unmotivated at work.
Yeah, definitely. We do need to wrap up soon, but there's one more thing that you kind of talked a bit on, but let's get into it a bit more. It's the idea of the lazy employee. It's because, there's this great David Mitchell skit where he says, like, every party that wants to come into power says, we'll always just find more money by eliminating waste. There's this big pile of waste that we'll just reduce waste to zero. Same thing with what you said about the employees. It's, we'll just make sure that all 8 hours are 8 working hours. And it's like, you're not gonna do that, buddy.
Okay, so this is the thing. Like, it frustrates me when people put this kind of logic onto humans. Like, humans are not logical, as in, literally anything could affect someone's performance, right? Like, it's common knowledge that everybody has good days and everybody has bad days. Like, some good days, you're smashing through all your tasks, you're just creating the best work, you're so, like, inspired, you're on a roll, as they say. And when you have bad days, like, you're supposed to account for that. Like, nobody's going to be at 100% all the time. In fact, if you're working at 100% all the time, that is burnout.
That just means that you've been working at 100% every day so far.
Exactly. Like, you're meant to lower that down to 40% on some days, and then higher again 60% on other days. And you know what? 80%, 75%, I think that's a really nice, like, level where you're still producing good work, but you're not emptying your tank, right? And it's when you say 8 hours a day, like, sure, you do have to count, like, okay, how many hours is that? Is literally just talking to people, because any manager or anyone who manages a team will tell you, like, 80% of their job is talking to people, is communicating, is checking on your team, and 20% of that is literally actually sitting on a desk creating the work. Whereas if you're an artist or something, it could be flip side, where 80% of your time is doing the work and 20% is communicating. But you can't just see that as like 8 hours of full on you glued to your desk, typing, creating, clicking here and there. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. Like, we are so much more complex than that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, you just like turned the key on something in my head, which is that personal guilt you put on yourself if you think
Yeah.
that maybe you checked your phone a second too long and you're like, oh man.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, let's say, you're in the office and you're walking past your colleague and he's on his phone. Like, would your first thought be like, oh, you're slacking off? Like, we need to shed this thought process, because what if he's checking his phone because, he needs to text his wife that he's, oh, sorry, like, you need to pick me up, the kids, on the way back, da da da. Like, we have lives. Like, our phones are literally our life now. Like, we do so much through that. Like, you can't think of technology as being part of slacking off. Like, if you see, okay, let's say you see someone browsing a website to buy something, like, is that slacking off? Or is that they're just taking a 5-minute break because, in fact, they've been concentrating for like 50 minutes before that? And that's a long time, by the way. Like, 50 minutes of full concentration, that tires you out. Even like the Pomodoro technique tells you to do it 25 minutes of concentration and then 5-minute break. So if someone's done a whole hour, let them have a 20-minute break,
Oh man, yeah. Oof.
I don't think we've touched a lot on the systemic issues of like, how can studio heads or managers do better? And we talk a lot about, as workers, what do we prioritize? Time, health, family, things like that. And I feel like people up top, they forget that. They remember those things for themselves, but they forget that those are also important to literally anyone else that is working underneath you.
I mean, because it's hard for us to talk about it on an administrative level, because I don't know, unless you're hiding the badge that says CEO of Project Red on your blazer, I don't think either of us run studios.
No.
The only thing we're really qualified to talk about is the worker side experience of it.
Yes, definitely. I don't agree with some where, like, if it's always been that way, it doesn't mean it has to. This is the power of young people, I would say. Like, they learn so quick, and we shouldn't be passing down bad habits or bad ideals.
Yeah, definitely. It's just like, you had it rough. We agree that that when you started out, you had it rough. That doesn't mean that, little Timmy over here, starting his new job as an in-between animator, has to do it too. Like, technology's advanced.
Exactly. And obviously there's a balance where you don't want somebody to become spoiled, but at the same time, like, why would you be so unbearably hard on someone based on that fear? That is kind of weird. Like, again, why would you hire somebody that you wouldn't trust to be able to perform? But like, just basing off my own experiences with companies, some of them did ask for crunch, some of them are paid, some of them are not. And my current company, it's a policy of zero crunch. And in effect, like, it's the opposite, where they remind people to not work more than they're supposed to. Like, that is literally a thing I've been told multiple times. Like, could you not? And I'm just like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Like, I literally just, I wanted to get this in by next week because I really wanted to, because I was really enjoying it. When you rabbit hole into a task that you love. And I think that is something special that happens, and it's great when it does. Like, that's what people talk about when they say, like, you just naturally spend more hours on something you love doing. But when companies treat that as a given, like you're supposed to be that way all the time, like, no. What? It's still a job. It's still a business,
I gotta ask though, when you have those moments, do you ever like have the thought in your head that's just like, I am a class traitor right now?
Honestly, no, because I love video games. I love making it. I love my craft, and the reason I don't feel bad is because my boss actually tells me off for it. He's just like, could you not? We want you to feel rested, because if you overwork yourself this week, then you're not going to be in good health next week, and we need you on all the time, you know? So it's about energy management. And I think that's good management, that you're motivating people who are unmotivated, and people who are spending way too much time to the detriment of their own health. You're telling them to pull back a little bit so that they have time to recover, because this goes with any kind of work, not just like your day job, but especially people who have a lot of like extracurriculars, you know, like people who do advocacy work outside of their main job. They have NGOs, nonprofits, you know, they volunteer. All these people, like, the way that I think it's a form of validation, like they want to help people. That's how they validate themselves. Someone always needs to tell them, like, look, you are no good to us if you burn out and then you have to take like 2-3 months away from the industry. That's like months of your creative output that in the industry is starved of. And the best way for you to, you know, to be the best that you can be is to manage your time now, so that you can keep going at a steady pace. You know, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Yeah, that's definitely the best way to describe it. And with that apt marathon comparison, I think we have an episode. unless there's anything else you'd like to throw in.
If the people who are listening in, if you're Malaysian or if you're just someone from Southeast Asia, I just want you to be brave. You know, it's difficult to go up to your bosses. I know. I shouldn't be saying this because I work in an English company, but
again, fully aware of our own privilege here.
Yeah, I'm very aware of my privilege, but at the same time, it's because of this that I want you to also have the same experience, you know, where I want you to enjoy your work. I want you to be able to tell, you know, the previous generation that, you know, this shouldn't be how it always be. And you are the present. And people who are coming into the industry, they look up to you. And do you want them to go through what you're going through now? Like, it's a shared responsibility, I think, that everybody needs to be aware of a very true human cost, that we're overworking ourselves to death for video games.
God, it was when you remember that this is all for video games, you can turn it either ways. Like, on one hand, you can say, think about it, you're working all this for Nier Automata, you know, this amazing game about, you know, being nice to each other and stuff. Or you could say, like, can you imagine you're working all these hours for, like, I don't know, what's a really crappy video game? Cyberpunk. Yeah, let's throw that under the bus one more time.
Yeah, it's rough, you know, because like no matter how big or small your video game is, you want to be proud of it. And I think everybody should be proud of their work. But that pride is taken away when you know that you've lost so much in the process. You know, like I feel really, really bad for people who work on Cyberpunk wanting to make the you know, the next big game, but they lost hours of their life, of time with their family, of just recovery, and it's hard for you to feel pride when you're just tired, right? If you're exhausted, you can't feel anything else.
That's definitely the thing. Anyways, thank you so much for coming on this show.
Thank you for having me. I hope that was all right, because I tend to ramble a lot, and I don't tend to have a point. I just go on and on. So I hope people like that, and thank you for having me on.
To be fair though, I think it's great because we really talked about it more on a ground level. Because I think a lot of people try to go for, you know, the God level of this is damaging to your mental health. Everyone is having, and we're just here talking about it as two people, you know, in the industry.
Yeah, and we're all people. Like we are literally just normal people. Like the industry isn't compromised of studios of video games. The industry is compromised of the people in it creating those things. You know, without the people, none of these things would exist at all. So
yeah, definitely. So this has been another episode of The Brave Room. If people wanted to hear more of your great takes, where could they find you?
I am very active on Twitter at Studio Anisa, and you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok on the same handle at Studio Anisa.
Yeah, I could never get over hearing TikTok being used as a legitimate platform. To me, it will always be, silly 17-year-olds doing challenges stuff.
Don't expect much from my TikTok. There's absolutely nothing in it, but
It's there.
it's there, It's a different side of me. It's usually me doing some kind of blind reaction to a sound that is funny. I like those. Those are fun.
They are fun. On the rare instance of me pimping something, don't forget to check out my article where I also spoke to more industry people about the whole crunch situation in Malaysia. Like, definitely give that a read. And as always, if this episode hits 2,000 plays, I will be forced to do one of your suggestions. So don't forget to leave a suggestion, square brackets, serious suggestion. And again, seriously, make it a good one. Don't give me something lame like, what's your favorite movie? Shape of Water. There, done. Topic answer. This has been The Brave Room. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.